Hello, Carl.
Greetings, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Are you enjoying your time back in the US now?
Yes, for sure. And speaking of backdrops, what's the deal? Your backdrop changed too.
Yes, change the background. I'm starting to just rearrange the office space a little bit. Like unwittingly, truly, it wasn't for this this setup, but I do have one of your drawings in the background here that I've actually had in the office for a long time. Just we got it a little bit more visible. It's been
You're
there
just you're just cleaning out the closet and trying to figure out what to do with that thing.
No, like it was out, but it was on the other side of the room. Like I can put this in camera view. It's much better than like my messy whiteboard and all the other stuff that was back
Yeah,
there.
it's perfect.
So,
Perfect.
trying to set it up a little bit better, right? I figure 9 months into a 9 months into a shutdown working from home, I can finally figure out how to finish getting my home office space rearranged. So
Yeah, it's crazy.
Since we're not done yet.
Yeah, for sure.
So last episode, we were talking about kind of like financial plan proposals and how we try to both, I think, set a new client in a more financial planning frame of mind and not necessarily have the conversation be so investment centric, as well as just literally like if you're trying to get a client to hire you for advice, what do you bring? What do you show? What's the tangible in that approach meeting with the client? So we had another question that came in that I thought was great because it's sort of the bookend of this issue. What happens later? So I feel like a lot of financial planning these days, it is all about the plan, right? We set up to the plan, capital T, capital P. We've had our discussions about the value of the plan and what's it worth to have the big book that you thunk down on the table. Financial planning software is all built to make the plan. And now we even talked about making financial plan proposals as part of the setup to the plan. So I don't actually want to talk about the plan today. I want to talk about what comes next, right? The average advisory firm is like a 90-something% retention rate. You know, like bad firms or problematic firms have like 92%. Good firms have 95 plus. Great firms often have 97% retention rates. So if you do the math, like your average client at a 96% retention rate has a 4% attrition rate. That's equivalent to the average client being with you for 25 years.
Mm.
And so much the financial planning process is basically here's what you do to make the plan over the first, whatever is 2, 3, 6 months of the planning process. And basically nothing about what do you do to add and show financial planning value for the next 24 and a half years after the first 6 months in the plan. Mm-hmm. Short of, at least what I feel like I learned early on, which is every few years you do another plan. And I know at the end of the day, like I know why I was taught that because I started in the insurance and product world. A plan was how you set up a product sale because you would demonstrate a gap or a need and then say, I can sell you the thing to fill the need. So we did a plan update every couple of years because it was a chance to sell a new product into whatever new gap we found. It wasn't actually a ongoing advice process. It was a find new sales opportunities process. Right. And I feel like even financial planning software today is still built for that, right? It's not a continuous evolving plan. It's like you do a plan and then you duplicate it and change the inputs and make another plan. And it's very one plan at a time because that's what we did in the sales world to find the next sales opportunity. So how do you think about if this is planning as a continuous process, how are we supposed to create and demonstrate value over the next 24 and a half years after the first 6 months if we're not just making a new plan every X years? Or maybe we do, and that's your prescription. But like how do you think about showing ongoing value with the plan?
I love that question. It reminds me of that old story where the guy shows up, he dies, and he shows up at the pearly gates and St. Peter's there, and he says, hey, it's your lucky day. Today you get to choose. And the guy, being smart, says, hey, oh, well, can I get a tour of both before I make a decision? So take him on a tour of hell, and it's like people eating wonderful food and all this, there's sports games on the TV. They're like everything. There's motorcycles and fast cars, like all of that stuff. And he's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And they takes him on a tour of heaven. And it's just people sitting around on clouds playing harps. It looks really boring. And he's like, this sounds strange, Peter, but I kind of want to go to that hell place. And they're like, okay. They press the button and the elevator goes down, and he gets off the elevator and everybody's chained up and it's fire and brimstone and they chain it. It's like, wait, what happened? And then he said, well, last time you came, you were a prospect. now you're a client. So, and I recently had to buy a new car, and the place was so good right up until the time I bought it. Like, and now they won't return my calls. So yeah, I think we need to avoid that. And that letdown, it seems to me, it's, depending on the complexity of client situations, it seems to me like a 3 to 12 month, like there's just a lot of heavy lifting early on. You might be talking often, and then suddenly you go to this like regular servicing model. And how do you keep people happy about that? And the only thing, we can get into specifics about what I've seen that really works, but I think the way to handle that is consistency, right? That people get to know. And here's what I've seen, and here's what we did in the firm I had, and what I've seen other people do, is we literally picked, every client had a day of the month. And so I remember, like, some of my favorite clients, Dan and Barbara Ford, they were, as I recall, their day was the third Thursday. So on the third Thursday, there was like 6 clients. And we had a service model that I was taught years ago. It was 12-4-2. It was 12 monthly contact, a contact once a month. It was 4 of those were a little bit more in depth, and 2 of those were in person, which I think is overkill now. I don't think 2 in person needs to happen. But whatever, you figure out like the depth of client. That should be something you think carefully about, like the specialty you've picked and the niche you've picked. Like maybe you do need to meet quarterly. Other people, you may only need to meet once every 3 years. You pick that out, but whatever it is, you build a consistent model around that. And so literally on the third Thursday, Dan and Barbara's folder would appear on my desk with 6 other folders. And depending on what type of meeting what type of contact it was, often it was just, we reviewed, I would open the folder. It looked like those folders that the doctors had. I went out and specifically bought them. They were like those cool folders that when you go to the doctor's office, they're all color coded, and they had like multiple dividers. And the first divider we called it, because I'd named things, we called it the 17-point wealth management audit. And this was specific because clients have no clue what we're doing. After we get through that heavy lifting thing, they don't know. Like, they just think we're sitting around.
Right.
And largely
waiting for them to call.
Yeah. And largely often our advice is do nothing. You know what I mean? So they're sort of like, wait, I'm paying you to tell me to do nothing and you're doing nothing. But
no. We have to, I'm paying you to sit around and wait to answer the phone so that when I call you, you tell me to do nothing.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to understand, to get to the point where you can professionally give somebody the advice that they should do nothing is a lot of work, right? Like that's different than the goofy people who just collect fees and deny claims or not return phone calls. So I literally one day I was like, this is crazy. So I said to my team, I said, will you please write down everything you do for clients? And so we wrote down things like, make sure that they can log in, make sure their accounts are householded. I don't know if we still call it that, but householded correctly, so they all appear when they log in the way they want. Are they reinvesting dividends? Do they have beneficiary designations correct? Do they have life insurance? Do we have an articulated life insurance plan? The whole thing. You will be shocked at the list if you literally say to your team, tell me everything we do, right? And then I made a list. Do the assets need to be rebalanced? The whole list. And so we literally made a list, and it was, I saw these when you go into the bathroom at McDonald's or at the airport. There used to be those checklists of the cleaning things that need to happen, and right. The person when they came in, they had to initial them. So we built a printed out, the first page of that folder was their one-page plan. The second side of that was this 17-point audit. And it had every month, it had the list of the things that have to take place. And it had a column for every month.
Okay.
And my assistant would initial the first 10 things, our dividends reinvested, did their check get mailed, did their automatic investment happen, She would initial everything she checked. And if there was anything out of order, she made a note. And then I would initial, and then I would call and say, hey, we just did your 17-point wealth management audit. And this was a way to communicate value without saying, do you know how much we do? We just did your 17-point wealth management audit. Everything's fine. I did that for like 2 years. And I'm almost done with this story. I did that, and we had a client advisory council. And the calls were always the same. In fact, most of them were voicemails. And these days, they would just be emails.
Right.
Hey, we just performed your wealth management audit. Everything's fine. If anything's changed in your life, let us know. And I'll talk to you next month. Right. So I was like, do I really need to be making these calls? So I asked the client advisory council, I'm like, hey, we do this thing.
Yeah.
We call you every month. We tell you, I'm like, I don't think we need to do it anymore. And they were like, no, you have no idea how amazing it has been to know that somebody looked at our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To just get that message. And some of them had caught on. I didn't tell Dan and Barbara that it was the third Thursday. Now I probably would. I'd probably go, your day is this, and this is what happens on this day. We pull out this folder. And then when they came in, right, when they come in for their annual meetings, guess what the first thing they see? They see their one-page plan. They see this audit with initials all over it. Like, look at all the stuff that's happening without us ever saying, look at all the stuff that's happening. So that's how we handled ongoing client service.
I love it. It reminds me a bit. We had an advisor on the podcast a ways back named Janya Stout, so she had a version of this. She works primarily in the 401k institutional space. So a little bit more institutional clients than call it retail clients, like individual consumers, but a very similar thing, right? So in the fiduciary 401k world, there's a giant list of all the different things that you need to do to very literally like demonstrate you have fulfilled your fiduciary obligations to the clients. And so not only would she just capture all this in the CRM, as we're ideally doing anyways, but she hired a developer to build an integration of Salesforce to yank all this information out and essentially to dump it into a standardized report template that was really nothing more than like, here is every service thing we did for you over the past year.
It's amazing.
And she produced what she would call a stewardship report.
It's awesome.
And the stewardship report was this just like one pager that had like line item after line item. Like we did this, we did this, we did this, date, timestamp over and over again, right? If you get really meticulous about everything that we do for clients, all the way through every service call, every background thing, every bit of shadow work, a lot of stuff can actually end out on that sheet over the span of a year, right? And they would even count the internal due diligence, did due diligence on this particular investment manager or fund that they hold, right? That goes into every single client's record because every client that holds that, like, I did that work for you as part of my ongoing work. And so what I thought was brilliant about what Janya did was not only that she made like kind of this stewardship report to pull it out of the CRM, but even that she just took it one step further and automated it. Wasn't terribly expensive because you can actually get a lot of stuff out of Salesforce. It's kind of built for that, particularly Salesforce. So she automated it. So it wasn't even hard to produce. So and they could do it in a nice polished manner every year for every annual review for every client. And they did it in the 401k context, but I don't know any reason why you couldn't do the exact same thing in the individual client realm. It would be the culmination of what you're talking about for what you were doing with your 17-point audit. Although I love that you went one step further of a monthly call check-in, which on the one hand, I'm kind of imagining like calling every single client every month is actually like a lot of phone calls. But on the flip side, as you pointed out, like it sounds like a lot of these were not planned scheduled calls. These are like drop-in calls, which you actually know most clients aren't necessarily going to answer. So this is like 20 minutes every morning of just like smile and dial your half a dozen clients, leave a few voicemail messages, maybe someone you get onto the phone, but the rest are just voicemail, move on, but you communicated it.
Yeah, let's think about that real quick, because I built a big spreadsheet to figure out how many clients, and the number was 96. I was like, okay, based on how many weeks I want to take off, how many days I want to work, and this idea of making quick phone calls and meeting. Now I'd probably do it like 12-2-1. So 12 contacts, 2 of them in depth, 1 in person. And so that opposite 6 months of the 1 in person would be a scheduled phone call that we would say, hey, this will probably last a half an hour. This is just, if we need it, I just want to get an update. But I can't remember what that number was, but if I have to contact 96 people, and most of those now, I would just automate most of those, like with an email. But I love
would you still do it with a phone call? Do you think it works if you do it by email?
I think I'd do it in email. I would just literally, what I would do is insert, like you'd have a template email.
Yep.
And the default would be everything's fine, but you would clearly still do the work. This doesn't work if you lie, right? Like you'd clearly do the work, and then you would make the changes. But I would also input. I wouldn't just automate those emails. I would input something like, "How's Jimmy doing?" I remember last time he was playing. I would just check in on those things too, so that they know it's, so you actually like took the time.
Your sentence or few of personalization at the top.
Yeah.
The rest is pretty much templated.
And clearly, if something has changed, like to the investment advisor piece, right? Like one of those things on the audit was review specific investments, check due diligence, anything going on there. If any of that stuff's changed, hey, we've got our eye on this.
Right.
Like you just a little bit of context. But I love that. What this else reminded me of was Ross's amazing book. That changed my life. The Wealth Management Index.
Yep.
Like just having an articulated life insurance philosophy, right? Just the fact that it was articulated, got you a score. And I love that idea of being able to track, which leads us back to like, okay, servicing clients for a long time. So outside of that ongoing service model, what else do people want to see? And I loved where Ross's book sort of pointed us, which was like, here was your beginning score. And as we've worked together, your score has improved. And I also love, we've talked about it before, that people want to see progress towards goals. They don't want to see performance.
Right.
They want to see progress towards goals. They've substituted those two things because we've taught them to substitute them. But if we can unteach them, and wouldn't it be cool if that Monte Carlo line, not only did you have, I think we talked about this, like having a confidence interval, and that you saw their actual line building over time.
Yep.
I used that, whoever that was, wealth care, somebody had that line for a while. Yep. And it was so great to be able to go like, hey, based on the last 3 years we've worked together, look at this line.
Right.
Like here, when we got down to 72%, that's when we made the decision to increase your equity allocation plus add a little bit of money. And here, where we got to 92, you took that trip.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff.
The one other version of this that was, I guess there are 2 other things that come to mind to me of just other ways I've seen advisors tackle and handle this. One is what I've taken to calling the client service calendar, which is, I guess, actually a version of what you just described, although I've seen it used more in the context of in-person meetings, kind of framing up what's going on with in-person meetings with clients, but it follows the same idea of, let's just make a calendar all the way through the year of both what we do for clients in person and all the stuff that happens in between, right? So in January, I'm preparing a capital gains summary report for your accountant. In February, I update your planning projections. In March, we do a rebalancing review and I send you the quarterly newsletter. In April, I send you a performance report. In May, we do an educational event. In June, we're going to either review your insurance or your estate documents. We're going to alternate every other year. So, 2021 June is going to be insurance review. 2022 June is going to be an estate review. I can go back and forth. And you just start laying out, like, here's what's going on that we're adding value to you every month of the year. And there's something, or you can easily structure it to be something all the way through. Now, some might be big things like we're going to meet in person, do a review. Some might be small things like I'm going to help you with the tax projections. I'm going to send you your report. Some might be in between, like, oh, we're going to do this webinar. We're going to do this client event. We're going to do a little end of year tax planning report. Whatever it is, you schedule it out for the year, which both shows the client, like, in case you're wondering what we do for you all year long, here's literally what we do for you all year long. It shows there's stuff going all year long instead of just the feeling of, what have you done for me lately? Because I haven't met with you in X months. And I think one of the things that becomes powerful for it as well is just shows clients how much stuff is happening. And when you do it on a calendar basis like that, you can start standardizing it for the firm. Like, okay, this month the newsletter is the big thing. Next month, the report's the big thing. The next month, our educational event's the big thing. And you can be building up to that and knowing what that is because you planned it out in advance, and it lets you systematize.
Totally. That reminds me of just a slight twist on that was just topically, right? Saying like having a topic for every month or every other month, life insurance, investment planning, estate planning, a family meeting, the investment process. And literally just every month so if this month is estate planning, we just go through and say, back to Ross's book, which I just love, was, what's each client's articulated philosophy based on this? Okay, great. How does the philosophy compare to actual? What do we need to change? And the philosophy could be, I don't need any of that stuff, whatever that stuff is. Oh, cool. We've got a 10 there, right? Like check. And then that's how you communicate. Hey, this month we reviewed your thing. We're all good here. There's nothing to do.
Well, and I think that's part of what makes the story you just told around the 17-point checklist so powerful. I think sometimes we overestimate how important it is that we do something and find something, and underestimate how important it is to just show that we were looking.
Yeah, and what I loved about that story you told was all the stuff you're already doing.
Yeah,
that's all. It was just finally like, let's just put this down, what we're already doing.
Yeah. Let's, instead of trying to invent all the new things we could do for clients, and I'm all for that as well, but let's just make sure we're at least getting credit for what we're actually doing.
Yeah, and let me just bring up one last thing I think is important, is I loved setting up in the very early meetings. We always called it, we had a name for it because that's what I do. We called it the financial pornography detox program. And we would say to clients in like after they had signed up as a client, like maybe like the third meeting, we're working out some stuff. We'd sort of on the way from the meeting to the door, we'd like joke, hey, you know what? That's funny. You guys have now entered our financial pornography detox program. And they'd be like, what? We'd say, well, it's kind of a joke, but the way it works is our goal is to get you to the point where you don't even think about us anymore. And you don't even like that's our goal, right? Our goal is not to be involved in your life all the time. Our goal is not like, I want to set up in their minds, like, our goal is to get you to the point where you don't even think about us anymore, right? It's not so that I no longer feel like I have to be calling you every week and going, did you see the market? Like proving my value. Actually, we are the most valuable when we fade into the background, right? And so we would set that up early just by saying like financial pornography detox, we'll know you get there when some of those things that you used to think about all the time, you might still see them and you'll sort of chuckle and go, oh yeah. Like, especially the news, you'll kind of in fact, we'll know you get there when the USA Today money section, you start thinking of it as the USA Today funny section, right? Like that's when we know you got there. That's so
I feel like you've actually said that to a client at some point.
I've said that 500 times. That's of course I have. We'd set it up that way. We're particularly trying to plant the seed. We're different from the person who wants to coordinate your social calendar, have you to lunch every other week, call you about the market, send you invites to seminars, like whatever. We're different. We want to fade in the background. That's the whole goal. Give you your life back. So anyway, that's great topic.
So one thing I think I would add to this as we wrap up, just because I have seen some advisors kind of get in trouble by swinging too far in this direction, like so much structure around what they're doing, that the one sort of asterisk to this all is Like the number one thing I've seen for what gives advisors most impact on an ongoing basis in servicing clients is that before every client check-in meeting that they're having, they send an agenda. And the first thing is there anything you want to add to this agenda? Just what do you want to be talking about? When they know it's coming, because you do it regularly and you built a habit around it, they start getting much more responsive about putting things onto the agenda and saying, I want to talk about this. When we just sort of do the check-in in the meeting, hey, has anything been going on? If you're like, let me think. They don't always come as prepared as giving them some time, a few days in advance. Just, hey, here are the things we are going to be talking about, but most important is that we cover whatever's on your mind. So is there anything you would like to add to the top of this agenda? And whatever they want to add is always on the top. Our stuff comes later, because what that happens in practice is if they got anything going on, it's at the top of the agenda, and then you talk about it. And if you talk about it a lot, A, it's valuable to the client because you're solving their issues. And B, guess what doesn't end up happening on the agenda? You don't get to the like, oh, and let's talk about your portfolio performance for a while, even though I didn't really want to, but there was nothing else to talk about. So now we have to talk about to fill the hour that we put on our calendar because we scheduled an hour meeting and we're trapped. Like we set up these traps for ourselves sometimes. Don't, even as you create some structure around this, don't miss that part, that giving the client the opportunity to say what they want to talk about and doing it in advance so they can, because some people need a little bit of time to germinate that. So like you're always having the conversation that's relevant to the client, whatever is going on in their world.
I love that. I had a friend who was super successful and he it still is. And he's like one of the most boring people I know. Like he has lots of ties, but they're all maroon. Drives the same Toyota Corolla. Nothing wrong with that. But
I hate people that just wear the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Over and over. Incredibly boring. But he's built this amazing business. But he doesn't send Christmas cards. He doesn't have events. He doesn't do any of these things. And I was like, his name's Kevin. I was like, Kevin, what? And he's like, look, people only want, like, we are focused on consistent service, like we talked about, and rapid response to problems, right? If something comes up that's out of this consistent thing, we are on it, right? Like we return the phone call, we jump on it, we drop everything, and it almost never happens. But when it does, we are on it. And I think that's a really good reminder, like the agenda, like your life is not a disruption to our process.
Oh, that's powerful. Your life is not a disruption to our process.
Twitter, go, hurry. Who's going to get it on Twitter first?
All right. Someone tweet it out.
All right.
Well, awesome.
Very cool, Michael. Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation, Carl. Thank you.
Amen.